I was hiking in one of those woods where there shouldn't have been anybody else around, partly because of just how remote the location was, and also because of how it was private property. I'm a pretty harmless individual, and I love the natural beauty of the property itself. So, I didn't really see any trouble in letting myself go on one discreet, secret-y hike through the forbidden woods, so to speak. The restriction of trespassing had made the forest especially wild and untamed. I felt like a pioneer exploring land that had never been seen before. The experience was intoxicating. The buzz of the moment was interrupted, though, by a sound that I nearly mistook for a chainsaw being started. It wasn't quite loud enough, and it was a very uneven sound. I couldn't tell if it was somebody's faulty machinery or if it was a mother bear giving birth. My curiosity got the better of me, however, and I decided to home in on the sound and try and find out what exactly it was. It was coming from the top of a hill. It was slow going on the climb up, due to the ground being unfamiliar with human traffic. I crested the top of the hill, and my heart nearly jumping in my throat when I saw a creature that was absolutely titanic, like a large brown orangutan with black fur and orange spots. It was laying down under a fallen tree, kind of shaped like an oversized bird's nest. This beast or monster had an incredible amount of detail to it. The fur around its chin created something like a beard, and it kind of wisped in the wind. It appeared intelligent, and this even lumbering giant could be, who knows, dangerous. It didn't appear to be overly friendly, though in its current state, it looked idle and relaxed. As I was blown away by what I was seeing, understanding that I might have just caught a snoozing Bigfoot, I went to pull out my phone, and as soon as I did, this thing, monster, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, was immediately alerted, sat up and looked around. I was afraid that it was going to hear my heart slamming against my ribs and my chest. It got up and began circling the perimeter of its spot. It didn't waste any time when it turned its back to me. I bolted, heedless of any noise I might make. The ground underneath me shook with the roar that pealed from the top of the hill behind me as it charged after me, very aggressively. I felt like I was crawling, nearly swimming as the overgrown sound was making it impossible to move at full speed. The footsteps thundering behind me were gaining quickly, and it must have been crushing every last tree and obstacle that dared to get in its way. My life then flashed before my eyes, and then things went black. No, not because I was devoured, but because I fell into a natural pit, twisting my ankle and pain shooting through me. But the raging noises of this creature sailed overhead. I, at one point or another, lost consciousness. It was probably only a couple of hours. I dragged myself and my ruined ankle out of the woods, off the property. That was a whole nother feat within itself. Thankfully, my car remained undisturbed and I was able to get home. I was much more shaken up by the experience than I had first thought. I developed a shaking all over my body that I didn't notice unless I'm holding still or trying to take a drink. I tried joining a therapy group for people struggling with trauma and PTSD. But of course, those groups expect you to be open and talk about what happened to you. I couldn't quite tell them that I was nearly mauled by a Bigfoot or a giant ape in the woods. I feel very alone with this experience, and I'm going to try and pass this story along to anybody who will bother to read it. Please, know that I am not crazy. I've tried to reason and argue with myself, but I know this happened. It wasn't a dream or a vision. I really did see this creature. And there was this one time a few years back when I was out in the forest, when I saw something that I will never forget. I work for the Forestry Commission and was busy doing some research-related work right in the middle of this large, huge expanse of woodland. I was busy taking samples of various types of dirt and even scat that I had found there. Now, scat always smells gross because of its nature, but I came across this large pile that smelled even worse and was abnormally large. It resembled human feces, but 3 times the size, and lots of it. I just remember thinking that we must have a gorilla in the woods. And that's when I noticed some tracks. They were huge, 3 times the size of my work boot. I'm a size 8, and these were super wide. And also, the indentation in the soil was at least an inch. The way they were spread out would appear that whatever was making them had an enormous gait and stride. Also, being able to walk pretty quickly on 2 feet, as these tracks were not quadrupedal, but bipedal. I began to get all these images of King Kong in my mind when something hit me on the arm. I gazed down, and there was a small rock. Then, suddenly another. I look up, thinking what is going on, and that's when I see him. He must have been around 8 feet tall, and easily weighed about 25 to 30 stone. He was huge, completely solid. It or he was covered in thick black fur, except for his face, which was this grayish old skin tone, no hair. His face looking like a perfect cross between an ape and a man. The huge hands and feet were visible, and they were also hairless. They looked just like our hands. No claws, nothing. Just big, nasty black nails. He looked me right in the eyes, and I could see that his eyes were either really dark, like a gorilla, or completely black. Not empty eye sockets, but the eyeballs were black. He kind of just made a deep grunting noise, almost kind of like a shrug, casually turned around and walked off. I picked up my bag and I ran. The sight of this creature and the behavior it was displaying, I knew exactly what I'd seen. There's no mistaking this was a Bigfoot, and I had absolutely no desire to be one of those people who stick around for photo evidence. I don't care if I had time. There was no telling what he was capable of or what he was doing. He was angry and wanted me gone. And when you're faced with an animal that big and powerful, especially knowing that they're not supposed to exist, well, you do what they want you to. So no, I don't have any proof, photo-wise, but I know what I saw, and I know there are many others like me that don't need a photo for proof. I was driving along one day when I saw something running across the field that the road was next to. It was a really large pasture, and it looked really large, but I couldn't see properly through all the trees. I don't know why, but I thought to start with it might be a bear, which is ridiculous. Bears in these parts don't get that big, and if they run, it's on all fours. This thing was on 2 legs, running just like a person. A big one. Then it just disappeared out of my sight. I might not have even thought about it again if it wasn't for the fact that a couple of weeks later, I was on the exact same stretch of road, and lo and behold, it was there again. This time, it was a bit earlier, and therefore lighter, so I got a better glance. The creature was also closer to me this time. This thing was huge, like a giant. It must have been around 10 feet tall, and weighed more than me and my family put together. It was covered in what looked like long, shaggy black hair, and from what I could see, the face was nearly human-like, both massively exaggerated features. It was moving quickly, and easily kept pace with the car. although I was driving pretty slow in order to be able to get this better glimpse of it. I think it seemed to know that I was there too, from the expression of its face. It certainly didn't seem to be afraid. I'm guessing that if I attempted to head to the car into the field that it was in, it would have easily been able to escape. It also didn't seem particularly threatening, but whilst it was running towards me, baring its teeth, I got the distinct feeling that it was somehow telling me to go, to leave it alone, and it would leave me alone in turn. It was a really weird sensation, and just for a moment, I slowed the car down a little more. Then it opened its huge mouth and roared. That was it. I felt like that was the final warning. Like it was telling me any more of this and it'll come and get me. So I put my foot down onto the gas and got out of there, not wasting any more time. Whatever that thing was, it certainly wasn't ready to mess around. I drove back down the road, time again afterwards, but I never saw it. One day, just out of curiosity when I hadn't seen it in weeks, I pulled up the car and got out. Looking into the field, I did see some tracks in the mud. Those footprints were massive. And then I finally realized what type of creature I had been lucky enough to see, but not wise enough to hang around and make it mad. I indeed saw a Bigfoot. I was in Alaska in a hunting blind, looking to bag an elk. I was well up off the ground where an animal would not think to look. I brought my binoculars to pass the time. I enjoy observing nature more than I enjoy shooting it. My hunting is strictly a matter of survival with me. The natural world eventually forgot that I was there, and I was treated to an excellent show of feathers and fur. They didn't have anything to worry about, since I was only into getting more food, and I preferred to really kill only one animal if I could help it, as opposed to shooting anything. At the time, I wasn't exactly sure what I was about to run into. I lowered my binoculars after one long sweep. I almost fell off my blind. This weird square-headed mammoth creature was looking at me at the top of its head, almost reach up to my blind. It appeared to be an ape by the overall build, but there was a very eerie aspect of humanity to it. It was probably the most terrifying of all. The eyes were a rich reddish brown, just like living wood. The fur looked borrowed from all kinds of forest-colored animals, weasels, beavers, wolves. You get it. It was just shaggier and far more coarse. It took a slow step in my direction, and I aimed my rifle right away. I can't even begin to describe the emotion that registered in the creature's brow when I did that. The feeling it sent through me was electric. It understood. I knew what I was doing. The guilt that I felt in that moment was like no other. I lowered my rifle, but slow, hoping that it picked up on the cue that I was giving it a pass and a warning. I even tried talking to it, although I didn't expect a response. It bellowed a roar that could have easily broken my bones, it was so loud. Afterwards, the creature ran off before I could do anything else. Look, I don't have any pictures to show for my experience, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be enchanted or traumatized. I won't be able to take this story to the grave. You seem to serve a very open-minded audience, so I hope this story does you well. Do with it what you will. Read it if you like. You have my full permission.